everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I thought I'd show you a really easy way to get rust marks and rust stains and patterns on small fabric sculptures. They look absolutely wonderful. They're an interesting contrast between fabric that hasn't been treated with these beautiful rust marks to one that has. It creates a really lovely visual interest in your work, and it's a technique I use over and over because it's such an easy process. So let's get started. I'll show you the materials that you will need to create these little rust sculptures, and then I'll show you the techniques to gain these beautiful marks and patinas. Now, there's not a lot you're going to need to make these little sculptures. You really need just some scrap pieces of fabric. I've got some bits of old sheets, some children's clothing, a little bit of canvas, really any odd shape, any size that you've got lying around that you're not using, some cushion filler for stuffing the the fabric sculptures themselves. You'll need some lengths of metal. Old rusty metal works well. I'm using some rebar that I found at my local resource centre. You can also buy it in the hardware shop. Lots of different thicknesses and lengths as well. These were already pre-cut, so I grabbed those. Old bolts work really well too, some long old bolts. Anything with a bit of length in them, so you've got this really nice visual effect of having a piece of metal hanging out either side of your fabric sculpture. You'll also need some embroidery thread and a needle. I've used the DMC embroidery thread. You'll need some household vinegar, which is just the cheapest vinegar I could find in the supermarket, and I pop it inside a spray bottle just to make it easier to spray on my fabric sculptures. So a pair of scissors and some Glad wrap or some plastic bags, some small freezer bags work really well as well, that you can wrap your sculptures up in after they have been sprayed with vinegar to let that beautiful rust magic work on them. So I thought I'd give you a quick look at the little guys before they are rusted up. They sit beautifully, actually. They look really lovely in themselves. So if you don't even want to rust them up, they're this beautiful organic sculpture as well. But once you start rusting them up, straight away you can see you've got this really interesting visual effect with the rust. The rust is a little unpredictable, which I really like, and you can't quite often tell what type of marks or color tones the rust piece of metal here is going to throw, which of course I like that idea of not being able to predict the colors or the marks, which means that when I put a whole heap together, they all look really different, which I really like. I love how the rust seeps through at the tips of the sculptures as well too. There's a beautiful blend of color and tone, which I really like. And then of course, if you sit them next to another sculpture that hasn't been treated with the rust solution, you've got that visual play as well, which is really exciting as well. So I'll pop them aside. There's a few different ways that I do these little sculptures, pretty similar to the sculpture we did in the last video if you want to check that out. But the difference with this one is that we have got a piece of metal inserted inside the sculpture rather than sewn on the outside. So for this one, I'm going to measure up the material. It's a little bit smaller than my rebar rod. This rebar is already rusty too, I thought I'd mention too, which makes the process of rusting it up really quick. So I've folded over the material and I'm going to cut just a half moon in it from top to bottom. So just cutting from the bottom to the top, so I've got a half moon shape. Now, as you can see, it's still slightly smaller than the rebar itself, which is good. And so I've threaded my needle with my embroidery thread. It's just a single strand, which is all I really need. I don't really need a lot of thread to close up these little sculptures. They're not very big. And so let's go. So for this one here, I want to insert the rod after I've done my sewing. I'll show you a different technique in a minute, but this is one way of doing it. So I'm going to leave a little opening at the top to insert my little piece of metal, and I'm going to leave a bigger opening at the bottom so I can stuff my cushion filler in through the bottom. So let's get started. I'm going to leave it little bit of space at the top, and it's just a simple over under stitch all the way along the edge of the sculpture. I'm not being particularly tidy with my stitches. I want them to look organic. I want them to look not too precise and not too much in line with each other or the same size. I want that feel of looseness in the sculpture, and having loose stitches just, I guess it sits alongside the feel of the organic shape a lot better. So I've left a little bit of an opening at the bottom here, about the size of my thumb, which I can then insert the cushion stuffing into it. So now it's just a simple matter of just inserting my metal rod through, hoping that I've kept enough room at the top to insert in, which I have. It's a nice snug fit. If you find that it's not snug enough, go back to the top of your sculpture and add a few more stitches right next to the metal bar. Even wrap it around with a few stitches to make it even tighter if you need to. Mine's quite tight, so I'll probably leave that in as is. And I'm going to grab my cushion filling and a pencil to help me push it in. And I'm just going to now stuff my sculpture with the filling until not too firm, but just a nice shape that I like. So use the pencil to push it down as I go. It's probably all that he needs. Just find the edges of my cloth again, and it's a simple matter of sewing the bottom up. If you find that your material is just a little bit too long, you can always just tuck it down a bit. So then I've still got that peak of metal hanging over the end, and then just, oops, the stuffing's going to peek out a bit. I'll just push him in. I'm going to wrap the thread around the end. I'm just going to make a nice little visual effect there with the material, just gathering it around in some different spots so it looks interesting at the end. And when it feels like the rod is sitting in there nice and snugly, I'll just tie it off. And that's one sculpture done. I'll push him along so he lines up. So as you can see, quite a simple process, but now the exciting part begins. I'm going to grab something just to pop down on my table because I'm going to use some vinegar and I don't really want it over on the paper as I spray. Now for the rusting up part, all I've got is some cheap household vinegar, the cheapest I could find from the supermarket, and I popped it in a plastic spray bottle. It's straight vinegar, there's no water added to it. And to create that really lovely rust look that I'm wanting on this piece of sculpture, I'm going to give it just a spray with some vinegar. And it's as simple as that. I'm going to grab some Glad wrap, or you could use a plastic bag if you like, and I'm going to simply wrap him up and let it sit inside the plastic for a couple of days. Now the great thing with using something plastic, you can watch the progress of these sculptures as the rust starts to form on the outside of the sculpture. You can gauge how it's looking, whether you want to create darker tones with the rust or leave it as is. These pieces here, I'll bring them in, they took 2 days to rust up. So the process isn't very long. And I could watch them through the plastic and decide whether I wanted to keep them a little bit darker or get them a little bit, keep them as is. But it'll start reacting pretty much within the first half an hour. And as I said, it's a really simple, easy way of getting some beautiful rust marks and patinas on pieces of sculpture. Now another way I like to make these fabric sculptures as well is give them a really nice loose organic fold look to them, which is a little bit different from cutting them into our half circles, which I just showed you a little while ago. These they create a little bit more of a visual effect, and you've got some places for the rust to really sink into and create some really nice effects in it as well. They're still pretty simple. All I do is I'll have a look at the length of my piece of metal. I don't mind if it's slightly larger in this one because I'm going to fold the cloth over this time, and I'm looking really at a way to make it look and feel organic. So for this one, I'm going to fold the top of it down, poke the little bit of metal over the end of it so I've got something visual to look at, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of filler and pop it down over the top. Now this way is a little bit fiddlier, but I really like the effect that I can get from folding the material up this way. So I give it a couple of folds, and I'm going to capture all of that in my fingers, fold it up nicely, not worrying about this end at the moment, and I'm simply going to grab my needle and my thread and start sewing along the fold line. I'm going to keep it really tight next to the metal bar to start with so it keeps it nice and tight. I might even wrap it around, and then I'm simply going to follow this fold line that the material made when I folded it over. My stitches are loose, they're not particularly in line, and I'm pulling the fabric together as it goes, and it's not making a nice puckering effect, which I want once it's finished. So I've reached the end of that first fold. I'm going to have a look at it. I might stuff the stuffing in just a little bit tighter, and then I might bring this fold over here. So as you can see, it's just I guess it's kind of just like a bundling effect, but I'm trying to keep it really nice and loose and organic. It's a little bit fiddlier this way, but I really like that organic feel that these little ones have as well. So I've reached the end. I'm going to follow this fold now, just tucking it in as I go. No rules, keep it simple and just go with the fabric. Just as long as it joins together and there's no filling coming out, you're not going to be sewing in any wrong places because there's really no rules to these little guys. So I'm going to just get my pencil, just push the stuffing in as I go. I'll get some more stuffing in a little while. I'm going to tuck that piece of material down now, and I might start doing a nice straight sew along this piece here. So I've got a nice little puckered effect at the top and in here. So I'm going to bring my needle down and follow this one down. Squeezing it all together as I go so that the filling is staying inside. Just a over under stitch all the way along here. I can feel it needs a bit more stuffing. There's not much that I can feel underneath my thumb, but I'm just going to follow this fold line down and just create a bit more of an area that I can pop some more stuffing in when I get to the end of it. I love the jaggedy look that the frayed ends of the fabric are throwing out. It looks really nice. So let's have a look. So I'll grab some more stuffing. I like the looseness of this shape as well because I never quite know what shape it'll actually end up with as I'm sewing along. Now I'm checking my rod looks good at that end. There might be a little bit too much material at this end even when I tuck it in, so I might just give it a bit of a trim so then I don't have to tuck in quite as much. And then I'm going to work out, I might have a fold over here, tuck this piece in, and then maybe just fold it up all around here so I can follow this fold all around the other side, which will look nice. Getting closer to the metal rod and keeping it nice and tight against the rod with those stitches as well. Maybe even looping around the rod once and then tying it off. I'm going to leave those loose bits of thread there. And as you can see, it's a totally different look from this guy here. It's got a quite uniform shape to it, even though it looks great and it still looks nice and soft and organic. This one looks totally different. It almost looks like a repaired piece of fabric, which is really interesting. Grab my cloth, grab some Glad wrap down and just give him a spray with the vinegar. So it's as simple as that. Roll it up, then tuck in the ends and simply let them sit for a couple of days and watch the progress of this rust magic do its work. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you really enjoyed the process of making these rust marked small fabric sculptures. I really enjoy making them. As you can tell, I've got quite a collection here. I'm going to leave these guys in the Glad wrap for at least a couple of days. Have a look through the plastic at the colours that are happening, and if I'm happy with the results, I'll unwrap them, let them dry out in the air, and I'll add them to my collection. So I hope you have fun making your own small rust stained sculptures, and happy creating.